And now the story of serial killer Dennis Nilsen is being retold in a new ITV drama.
In just a moment, we'll be hearing from criminologist David Wilson, who came face-to-face with Nilsen on several occasions. But first, here's a look at ITV's gripping new drama, Des.
On February the 9th, 1983, a grisly discovery was made in the drains of a small North London flat at 23 Cranley Gardens.
Dennis Nilsen.
Right.
My name is Detective Chief Inspector Peter J. We'd like to talk to you about your drains. Right, don't muck me about. Where's the rest of the body?
In the cupboard.
Known as the Kindly Killer, Dennis Nilsen was a local civil servant who spent 5 years murdering boys and young men he met on the streets of Soho between 1978 and 1983.
So we're talking about one body or two? 15 or 16, I think.
40 years on from his killing spree, David Tennant is taking on the role of the notorious serial killer in ITV's new true crime drama, Des.
Our story begins when Dennis Nilsen is found out, when he's taken in to police custody, and we uncover the true nature of the horror of what went on. It's about the real-world impact of that. He's not Hannibal Lecter, he's just a bloke. That's what's so chilling about Dennis Nilsen.
Have you searched the rest of the flat yet? We're in the process of that as we speak.
You'll find more in the tea chest in my bedroom and in the turned-up drawer in my bathroom. All in all, the remains of 3 people.
Daniel Mays plays the role of DCI Peter J, who led the investigation.
If you know of anybody that's gone missing, sons, brothers, fathers, uncles, nephews, cousins, please contact us, because we need your help.
He was desperately trying to keep afloat, and that is the driving force of the piece, is for him to get all of the identities of the victims for all of those grieving parents, and that really weighed heavily, not just on Peter, but the whole of his team.
I believe it's important to tell stories like this, but in telling, we have to be aware to the sensitivities of that, and that this is not about glorifying Dennis Nilsen's own egomania. It's not about feeding into his narcissism.
I have to ask, why did you do this?
Well, I don't really know. I was rather hoping you could tell me that.
For all the answers and more, watch Des tonight at 9 on ITV.
Well, that looks brilliant. And as Phil said there, that is tonight at 9 p.m. But the true story is even more sinister.
Well, we're joined now by criminologist David Wilson, who met Dennis Nilsen many times whilst working as a prison governor. Good morning to you. And so explain, because you were, I think, the youngest prison governor in the country. How did you meet him?
I had literally just become an assistant governor under training at Wormwood Scrubs, having finished my PhD, and Nilsen had been on remand at Brixton, and then as soon as he was sentenced, he got transferred to Wormwood Scrubs, and that's how I came to meet him. He literally was brought in to my office as the new assistant governor under training, and I had to go through some simple formal administrative tasks with him, but that meeting was to cement a relationship with Nilsen that would last until he died.
And so what was your first impression of him? What was the guy like?
So everybody wants to imagine that serial killers are like Hannibal Lecter, and it was interesting, David Tennant used that fictional character even in the little piece that you used as VT. But Nilsen wasn't an extraordinary man like Hannibal Lecter at all. Nilsen was ordinary and banal. And in fact, when he left my office, I remember turning to the senior officer that was with me and saying, he looks like a weedy geography teacher that would struggle to control his GCSE class. And so there was this real disconnect between what he had been convicted of and the man who had just appeared in my office.
There's an uncanny likeness between him and David, isn't there? It's extraordinary. You say that he was, and it struck us both as we were watching that there, how quickly he gave up the information.
Nilsen was an interesting person because of all the serial killers that I've met, he was the one that was prepared to speak most openly about what he had done. He would try and impose upon us an analysis of what he had done. But you've got to remember, I think, Philip, that the reason why he was so keen to respond to what the police were asking him was that he himself had been a police officer in the Metropolitan Police. And prior to joining the police force, he'd obviously also been in the army. So he was associated with disciplined and disciplinary organizations and institutions. And I think it was that shared connection culturally to the fact that he was being interviewed by the police that led to him immediately talking about what it was that he had done, albeit I don't think that he told us all the accurate information that he possessed.
Why do you think he was able to get away with it for so long? Because his killing spree lasted for longer than 5 years.
The simple answer to that question, which is a good question, Holly, is homophobia. The reason that he was able to escape for as long as he did, continuing to kill young men, many of whom were homeless, the majority of whom were gay, was because of the homophobia that existed at that time within our police and within our culture more generally. We always have to remember that two young men, one in particular called Douglas Stewart, escaped from Nilsen when Nilsen had tried to kill them. And Douglas Stewart literally ran out of Nilsen's flat, telephoned 999 and reported the matter to the police. The police were on the scene within 5 minutes. He went, Douglas Stewart took the police back to Nilsen's flat, and then he said, this is Douglas Stewart saying, as soon as they thought this was about a gay relationship, they didn't want to know anything about what I was trying to report to them. And of course, they wouldn't get back in touch with Douglas Stewart until eventually, and it wasn't the police that catch Dennis Nilsen, it was actually the dino rod engineer who was actually sent out to unblock the drains. And it was only at that point the police eventually got back to Douglas Stewart. And so homophobia is the context in which we understand why Nilsen was able to continue killing for over 5 years.
And your relationship with him, as you say, carried on until he died. And do you think? Did you say you thought he was attracted to you?
I was literally 23 years old when he first met me and came into my cell, and I was a doctor of philosophy, and I think I was in the age group that Nilsen victims, in the same age group as Nilsen's victims. And on one occasion, not on that occasion, but at a later date when he was being held in HMP Whitemoor in Cambridgeshire, I interviewed Nilsen about another matter. And as I finished the interview, he leaned over the desk and touched my hand. And he said, "Do you have to go?" And he knew that I knew that those were the words that he had first used prior to killing his first victims. He killed for company. And I think that was something to do with he was playing with me, he was toying with me. And it's a long time ago, but I think he fancied me. Yeah.
So you think he was gay?
Oh, totally. Dennis Nilsen was absolutely gay, and homophobia, and his homophobia is the context in which to understand the significance of his crimes and the failure of the police to be able to catch this type of perpetrator. And, you know, our most recent serial killer, which I write about in my latest book, A History of British Serial Killing, is also a gay man, Stephen Port, who the police, again, failed to capture him. despite the fact that he was killing young gay men and leaving their bodies literally within half a mile of his flat. Homophobia is one of the persistent issues that we need to address if we want to reduce the incidence of serial killing in our community.
Yeah, I mean, David Tennant said there that you don't want to glorify serial killers. However, it's an important story to be told. But you say that if he was still alive, he would enjoy that there is this dramatisation of his story.
Oh, he would absolutely love it. He would absolutely love the fact that David Tennant was playing Dennis Nilsen. Dennis Nilsen, more clinically, we talked about homophobia, but more clinically, Dennis Nilsen was a narcissist. He was interested in power and control, and the power and control was ultimately demonstrated for him because of his narcissism in his ability to take the lives of a number of other young men, some of whom were also gay. I always remember Nilsen describing to me, I hope it's not too much detail, but he would he would bring a mirror into the bedroom and prop the mirror up so that he could see himself and the dead young man at the same time. And that's the level of his narcissism, that he actually wanted to see himself in that moment when he ultimately expresses the power and control that he had over that young man's life.
And just finally, David, what do you think? You knew him for many years. You continue to write to him. He continued to write to you. Did you ever get any closer to what his motive actually was? Was he mad? Was he bad?
He was completely sane. There was no evidence of mental illness. Never ignore the phrases that I've used throughout the interview, Phil. He was interested in power and control. And for him, the ultimate form of expressing that power and control was through taking other people's lives. He was often drunk when he committed the crimes. Alcohol played a role in what he did. It also anesthetized him to the fact that he was cutting up the bodies and disposing of some body parts. And I think ultimately the kind of personality that we're dealing with is somebody who was psychopathic, that there were elements of psychopathy in his background and in his personality, but ultimately the context and why this program, why the drama is so important, ultimately the context that allowed him to be and do what he did was the failure of our police to take seriously the fact that young gay men were being murdered.
David, thank you very much. Des, as we said there, starts tonight, 9 p.m. on ITV. Right, still to come.